I'll keep driving. Yeah, I'll keep driving.
Yeah, I think people are coming into the room, so I think we can start this session. Good morning. I'm glad to see as many turning up for the second day. I'm really looking forward to the next session, which is on offshore wind and the integration of renewables. We know that governments, countries, companies have extremely offensive strategies and plans, and the regional dimension is strong. The European dimension is strong. We know that the learning curve is steep and the costs are going down. We see it in the North Sea region and basin, and we see it in the Baltic Sea. So I hope that we can get increased insight into plans seen from the production side and seen from the TSO grid perspective. Finally, I'm also in particular pleased to see that Iceland is here to give an update on geothermal energy strategies and their experience. Even if this is another technology, I think it's very timely that Iceland is here. I hope I haven't seen the Iceland is there. Very good. But let's start out the session with Equinor, the Norwegian-based company, and it's Hanna Mary Goodlad, head of the Baltic Sea area development in Equinor, and she is going to speak on the topic of responding to the transition energy trilemma. Is that correct? So I give the floor to you.
Very good. My mic is working? Very good. Dear guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be here with you. I'm very delighted that I can be in Tallinn today with yourselves, and it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you. My name is Hanna Mary. I head up the Baltic Sea area development, as Johan said, And so my responsibility is covering the Baltic Sea in general. This is the book that I'm reading at the moment. It's called The Salt Roads, and it's about how salt fish united Northern Europe, the Baltics and Nordics together over the last couple of 100 years. It's a book written by a Shetland author. Shetland is the islands there in the red circle, and the Shetland Islands are my home. It's where I was born and raised, and it's a place that shaped me beyond measure. I know many of you are from maritime coastal communities as well, and I think that that does something. It binds us together. It's something about the people that we are. It's something about the purpose that we have as people as well. And so this book, The Salt Roads, it goes into detail about how culture made, how the fishing industry made the culture that we all share as the maritime coastal communities that we are. There's something about growing up in a place like Shetland that does something to you. It's a place that is exposed to harsh conditions. It's got harsh weather. It's very much like Iceland, very much like Faroe, Norway, the Baltic states. And that does something to the innovation of the people that live there. And you've always got one eye on the sea. You've always got one eye to see what's going to come in next with the tide. But there's the salt roads that united us, but there's also another road that we're on together that is absolutely crucial to get right. And that is the road to net zero. That's a road that is critical to where we go as a human kind. It's critical that we get that road correct. We have to have the right toolkit, we have to have the correct map, and we have to have the right partners along the journey with us on that road as well. It's a very challenging context that we have at the moment when it comes to the energy industry, the energy climate, and climate change in general. And the brutal war in Ukraine via Russia's invasion has made things harder. It's taken a challenging situation and made it a lot harder to really understand how we step up to the challenge. But one thing's clear, there is an energy trilemma that we have going on right now. That is that we have to have reliable, sustainable and affordable energy at the same time. And this is a trilemma, a triangle that must be targeted at the same time. There's no point doubling down on the affordability part and ignoring the sustainability part. And equally, the reliability needs to be done in tandem with the other two. So it's a trilemma that we have to tackle all 3 points to make sure that we build a fairer future for people and planet. One that is able to be greener, where more have more opportunities. So the energy trilemma is demanding, and it's fair to say that we are off track. We heard many times yesterday about the targets that we keep missing, and it's a challenge that we are very much on together. Equinor every year produces something called energy perspectives. And we look into the world around us, look into the geopolitical context with a lens focused on energy. The next couple of slides I want to show are taken from energy perspectives a couple of years ago. The slide behind me here is showing the global CO2 emissions over the last 30 years. Countries came together in the early 90s to say, we are going to limit CO2 emissions. And year on year on year since then, CO2 emissions have risen. Apart from 2 occasions, 2008 and more recently 2020 and 21. And those drops in CO2 emissions didn't come from any technology advancement or any innovation or any better use of energy. They came because demand dropped. Demand dropped with, of course, 2008, the financial crisis, and then more recently, as we all remember, the pandemic that we've just exited. demand is absolutely crucial to get right when it comes to the energy transition. And it's something that was talked about many times yesterday, in that we have to tackle demand alongside supply. And demand comes down to choices. It comes down to choices of governments, countries, but also personal choices. Everybody in this room has personal choices to make when it comes to our own demand of energy. Energy transitions are nothing new. We've had many energy transitions before in the history of humankind, and we'll have many again. We've had the biomass age, the coal age, the oil age. Now we're going into a sort of renewable age as well, and of course the golden age of gas in between. But what's interesting when you dig into some of the figures behind this is the topic of energy transitions versus energy additions. Because in each sequential stage, the biomass, the coal, the oil, the gas, have we actually transitioned? Or have we just added energy on top? So, what is fundamental to get right, and we heard it yesterday, if you're going to take away something, if you're going to destroy something, you must have something to replace it. In this next energy transition, let's not make this just about adding energy on top of an already squeezed system that is growing all the time. Let's make this about an actual energy transition and a replacement. So what is Equinor doing? So Equinor, for those of you who don't know, is the Norwegian state-owned energy company. It's an energy company that is Norwegian in heritage, in culture, but also we have global operations in 20 countries worldwide, around about 20,000 employees as well. And it's a company that's really delivered on its purpose to create value for society through the extraction of natural resources. We have 3 pillars of our strategy. Number 1, to optimize our oil and gas. We are going to continue to produce oil and gas in the most carbon efficient way possible. And we're going to do so in order to make sure that we are able to be the most sustainable oil and gas producer. Oil and gas is very important, and we need it now, and we're going to need it in the future. Anyone who tells you otherwise is lying or deluded. It is going to be part of the energy mix. But we have to do it in the most sustainable, environmental way possible. We're also cutting back in terms of our wider field exploration, and we're focusing in on just optimizing the basins that we know, because we understand that we will need to phase out oil and gas. Secondly, we're going to double down on renewables, and that's the part of the business I work in now, although I did start in oil and gas as a geologist. So we're going to double down on renewables, and we see that this is playing to our strengths. We have experience within offshore for many, many decades on the Norwegian continental shelf, and we're now pivoting that towards offshore wind, big time. So our targets are 12 to 16 gigawatts capacity within renewables. And then the last part is the low carbon solutions. And this is around developing our carbon capture capability. It's about developing our hydrogen and our new emerging fuel business. This part of our strategy is critical to meet net zero. Some people see that carbon capture is a distraction. It's absolutely vital, in our opinion. This is going to be vital for the parts of our society that are hard to decarbonize and hard to electrify. We're going to have mechanisms by which we can remove CO2 for the sort of heavier industries that we have. And how will we do this? Well, Equinor has 50 years on the Norwegian continental shelf. We just celebrated actually our 50th birthday party. And that was really exciting, and we're starting to think about the next 50 years. I don't know if I'll be around then, but I certainly plan to be around for quite a bit of it. But how we will do this is we take what we have and we transition it and pivot towards a new context. Number 1 is safety. If we can't send people home at the end of the day safe, then everything else we do is insignificant. Safety is number 1 priority. Secondly, large complex projects offshore. We've done a few of these before, and humbly we think that we can do a lot more. The experience that we have in deep water in the Norwegian continental shelf is serving us now very well as we pivot towards floating wind, for example. 3, financial strength and being able to take risk. We have a good balance sheet, and we're now pivoting that towards renewables. By 2030, 50% of our investments will be in low carbon and renewables. And to me, that's more than just words. That's really action. That's putting your money where your mouth is. Number 4, leverage local presence within the countries that we operate in. Equinor is Norwegian, but we're deeply proud of the countries that we operate in, and having local partners and local communities that trust us is really, really vital to us. Number 5, marine operations. This is something that we have done, as I said, for many, many decades, and now we're seeing it as a strength as we take that marine operations into a different context, into offshore wind and deep water technologies. Finally, technology and innovation. We're a company that constantly strives, constantly tries to be better, and really pushes the boundary. We have to stay ahead of the curve. But the energy transition, as I mentioned at the start, and this road to net zero that we're on, is challenging, is difficult. And I want to talk about diversity for the next part. Diversity can mean lots of things. It can mean the background that you come from, making sure that we have different people around the table to handle risk. But diversity of product, diversity of commodities is key to the energy transition. Over the last 8 months, we've all felt personally, and I know that Estonia has felt it more than most, and the Baltic states have felt it more than most, that being reliant on one provider or one provision of energy puts you in a really vulnerable position. And of course, I'm talking about Russian gas. So diversity in the context of becoming an offshore wind becoming an offshore wind global major and also becoming a market-driven power producer is key. We have to have a whole toolbox of technologies in our sort of solution bank to be able to apply this to the new context we find ourselves in. Hydrocarbons, offshore wind, solar, carbon capture, and many others. So it's about a diversity of product that will help us rise to the challenge of the energy transition. And what we're doing now is really trying to take a customer-centric approach to what we do in Equinor. Starting with the customer, whether that's consumers like yourselves, like me, whether that's government, whether that's companies. Starting with the customer, understanding what they want, working backwards, and then engineering complex decarbonized solutions for the customer's needs. And that's key. In terms of offshore wind, we have a growing portfolio already. Our home is the North Sea. That is where we started out with our operations in offshore wind. We're now building up the US East Coast, and we have growth within Asia as well, namely Japan and South Korea. But the region that is, of course, closest to my heart is the Baltic Sea, and that is our back doorstep. If the North Sea is our home, then the Baltic Sea is our back doorstep. And our journey in the Baltic Sea started many decades ago, actually. We had a downstream retail business based in Poland and also Sweden. And we also have been supplying gas to the region for the last 10 years. We're the largest supplier of gas, or LNG actually, to Lithuania. So we've had a downstream sort of gas position for many, many years in the Baltic Sea. But in 2016, that marked the entrance into offshore wind for us in the Baltic Sea. So we bought into the German offshore wind farm Arkona, and that started our journey in offshore wind. We also have a 3 gigawatt pipeline within Poland. We have several offices in Poland now that we're building up. And more recently, we have acquired a couple of companies that do solar activities across the Baltic countries. So within Sweden, in Denmark, and Poland. And then we have our eye on the Baltic states as well. So it's a region that we feel that we as Equinor can really add value to, because it's a region that's at the sharp end of energy transition. And it's also a region where energy, economics, and politics meet. And that provides a really interesting backdrop for a company like Equinor with a diversity of product. And we think it's a region that can very much help us to play to our strengths. Getting to net zero, that road to net zero, it's not an overnight switch. It's a journey, and it absolutely will take time. But we all have our part to play in this, and no matter how big, no matter how small, everyone's part is incredibly important. You know, this could be the decade that is the most exciting for the energy industry. This could be the decade where we say, no more business as usual, and we're actually going to change things around. We could be the generation that does things differently, but it all comes down to choice. And it all comes down to the choices that we make as companies, as people, and as countries. I'm going to finish off with the last paragraph in The Salt Roads. And the author talks about the choices that we make in terms of the food that we eat. So if you'll allow me, I'll take 1 minute at the end. If society accepts that it has a moral responsibility to feed its growing population, then more food needs to be produced. The way to do that without destroying the planet is to use the ocean more wisely. To use the ocean wisely through better managed fisheries and sustainable aquaculture. So, if you want to save the planet, eat farmed mussels for a starter, followed by mackerel as a main course. And I would add, build more offshore wind. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe stay a little bit.
Yeah, I can take questions.
Do you have questions for Anna-Marie? Yes, I can see one hand.
That's great. Thank you very much for a great beginning for the second day of the conference. My name is Paavo. I come from the Finnish embassy here in Tallinn. The last part of the presentation, second to last, not the excellent quote from the book, was actually the one that I would like to focus on when we looked at the Baltic Sea and look at the different projects. I've been in Tallinn for 3 years myself. Been listening to a lot of opinion leaders who've been saying that wind power, and especially offshore wind, has been on the table for quite a while. So just a question perhaps to Equinor is, what is your outlook like? Has there been some kind of something that's been hindering that development up to this point? Because it seems that there's been a lot of ideas, but now it seems that we need to actually rush ahead of ourselves, and something needs to have been done. So it'd be very interesting to hear if from the private sector, so to say, has there been something which has been holding you back? Has it been a market issue? Has it been permitting? And what could we then do more to actually increase these opportunities? Because we're not only talking about energy transitions per se, we're also looking at great economic and social issues in the region where a lot of these developments could actually play a large part. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. So I think when it comes to the progress in the Baltic Sea, we have seen good movements, like you say, from the countries surrounding, the sort of 8 countries surrounding the Baltic states. You had the 2020 ambition plan on the Baltic Sea cooperation, and then more recently you've had a double down on that again. So going from 1.3 gigawatts to 20 gigawatts by 2030. I think one thing that the Baltic Sea is able to leverage from the success that we see in the North Sea, as you mentioned, Johan, is that you don't need to repeat the mistakes that were made in the North Sea. You can choose to be able to fast track the permitting, to be able to supply industry with a pipeline of projects. I think that's really important. Industry likes, and private sector likes to have foresight as to what is coming our way. It gives investor confidence, and it gives confidence to the supply chain. I also think that the Baltic Sea, if we're being honest, it does have a challenge when it comes to its infrastructure and its port capacity. I come from Scotland, from Shetland, and we are blessed with the fact that we've had the oil and gas industry. Now, that is a supply chain it's almost ready, available to be picked and transitioned across. So the final thing I would say is that the investment needs to happen within ports and infrastructure in the Baltic Sea to really have that solid foundation of industry and supply chain to support this brand new offshore wind industry that you have. You've seen that happen in Denmark. You now see that happening in Poland. It's a bit of a race now for the Baltic states. You know, the prize is huge when it comes to offshore wind in the Baltic Sea. 90 gigawatts is the target by 2050. And there's going to have to be multiple hubs across the Baltic Sea. Not just Poland, not just Denmark. So how can the east part of the Baltic Sea be served by another hub or by another two? Take it as a competition. That makes us sharper, it makes us faster. How can you be the first to sort of create that network of infrastructure that the offshore wind industry will need? And the last, I know I said it was the last point, but I'll make one last one. People. People are so important. And I'm not just talking about people with university degrees. We need people that are competent in terms of technicians. You know, we need to have a better balance when it comes to our education system. How can countries really start to invest in our young folk, being able to equip them with the best education through all parts of education? Technical and practical education, and also education at a higher university level. So investing in our young folk will reap the benefits, because they'll be the ones that are able to serve the industry when it arrives here.
Thank you very much. And I can see one hand.
Hello. It's working. Okay. What is your favorite hub in Baltic Sea? This is one question, and the other one is, what does Equinor do to boost or promote this offshore stuff among young people? I mean, if you're planning your operations in the long run.
Yes, so I didn't actually catch the first part of your question. What is, you said?
So how do you promote offshore among young people?
Yes.
And education, and what do you do actually with the universities and I mean, what should you learn from you?
Yeah, I got that part of the question. I thought you said something about hubs. Yes. I think I can answer it. So,
what is your favorite hub in Baltic Sea among Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? Your favorite, personal, and Equinor favorite.
Well, I'm not going to get into that level of detail, but I can certainly answer your second question. In terms of our support for young people, we have apprenticeship schemes. We take on apprentices in our offshore wind farms that are operational in the UK. We've invested into the local towns within Poland's north coast at Gdansk. We're sponsoring the Gdansk University. We're taking local people in, summer interns. We had 2 last year in Poland. And this is something that we try and do in every country that we're present in. Now, we don't have operations in offshore wind outside of the UK yet. But our offshore wind operations in the UK have supported a wide range of young folk within the region. We support universities, we support training colleges. We have a community fund of multiple £1 million per year into that local northeast coast of England, where we have our operations. And it's that sort of model that we want to see replicated, putting value back into local society, where we will start to build up operations elsewhere in the Baltic Sea and beyond.
Thank you. So do you have any cooperation with TalTech, Tartu University, or any other university in the Baltics?
In the Baltic countries?
Yes.
The Baltic states? No,
Yes.
not yet.
Why? You say that you have to do something. I mean, we're rushing somewhere, and you're doing nothing.
There are 8 countries across the Baltic Sea, and Equinor is not going to do something in all 8, but we're very targeted and precise on which countries that we're in, and we're building up offices in Poland just now and supporting the Polish universities.
Thank you very much, Hanna-Mari. Very, very interesting speech. Thank you very much. And this link back to the ocean culture, the broad brush historical line on this trilemma, very interesting. So next speaker is Niclas Broman, head of offshore connection, Svenska Kraftnät, the Svenska TSO, offshore wind and challenges from the system operator perspective. And it's important to have the grid companies with us when developing offshore wind, obviously. So indeed, yeah. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Is the mic on? Yes, it is. Good. Let's see there. It's quicker as well. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a privilege to be talking to you from our perspective as being the electricity transmission owner in Sweden. And also Hanna, very good introduction. I can tell you that you can also be raised in the dark forest of northern Sweden and still fall in love with the ocean. So it's a possible transition to make. I'm heading what we call the Offshore Connections Department within the TSO of Sweden. What we are doing and planning for is, of course, providing an infrastructure to allow for the development of offshore wind in Sweden primarily, of course. I'll start with sort of the transmission system operator perspective, which is, and what Svenska Kraftnät, which is our name. We are a government agency. So what our role is in the Swedish context, we are the transmission system operator, which means we run the power grid and making sure that the lights are on at all times and they keep on. We are also the transmission grid owner, which is where sort of I work on my daily basis. It's more of providing the actual physical grid that you need in order to transport electricity. We are also the authority of contingency planning, which is a very important topic, especially in these days, with making sure that the grid is available even in hard times, be it during natural challenges, disasters, or other parts of what could happen. So making sure that the lights continue to be on a national perspective. So that's what we do. Very, very simple. What do you do as a system operator? Well, you have to balance at all times production and consumption. You know, electricity is consumed and produced at the same time. So 50 hertz, that's our target at all times in our operating room in our head office. We also need to make sure that the power that is being delivered from sources to customers also maintains the quality that it needs to do. That's maintaining voltages, maintaining other parameters that are quite technical in the electricity grid. We also need to make sure that the power and energy flows through the grid is in a way so we never overload a transmission line or a component somewhere which will cause a failure and then a blackout in some way or form. And the last thing that we need to make sure that if something happened that we don't plan, or we plan for but hope never happens, we need to make sure that we can restart the system at all times if we fail to do the above. So that's basically really sort of the heart of what we need to do as a system operator. Looking at Sweden, I'm talking from a Swedish context. This is one of the big challenges for the nation of Sweden, as many other nations also have the same kind of challenge, is that we see coming from like 20, 30 years of fairly flat electricity consumption need, we now see in the coming 20 years that we will need to double our energy production. These are different scenarios that we have in our long-term market outlook. Everything points toward this end now. And in Sweden, it's the transformation of the industry, especially steel, making steel out of iron, where they move away from carbon to hydrogen, and that sort of drives this big transition. But you have the transition, transport markets and everywhere else as well. As an example, the largest mining company in the northern Sweden, LKAB, they announced that they're going to increase their share of the value chain and also go from carbon to hydrogen. From I think it was 4 years ago, it was something that was talked about a little bit. Now it's a fact. And all of a sudden, we need another Denmark in electricity production only to provide that company with power to do this transition. So that brings you sort of the scale of things. It's a massive change in society if we're going to make this happen. So it's an interesting context to also bear with you that it's not only increasing, it's also changing sort of the foundation of many parts of our energy landscape. Very interesting to work in this environment. This is very technical. I'll try to make it on a sort of a high level. Something that we need to look out for, which was I mentioned, we need to make sure that however we do this transition, when we add more power, when we change the consumption and so on, we need to, as a system operator, always make sure that we have a system stability that is intact. And one of the things that happens in Sweden, for instance, is it has been a lot of dismantling of, for instance, heavy generators such as nuclear power stations, and we've added wind power. Wind power has another characteristic, so the rotating mass of the whole system, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter, which makes it harder to control for us. So that's something that we need to make sure works. There's, of course, a balance between consumption and production at all times. And with more wind power compared to other sort of plannable power, you get a system which is harder to plan in advance. The grid capacity, we see the changes in flows due to these changes in society, which also makes a big challenge for us as a TSO. And yeah, I was talking about the generation adequacy as well. There's a large structural change in where power is produced and how and so on. So we need to, apart from building new grid, also make sure that we provide markets to provide new sorts of services in this. Because there's a lot more to electricity than just the megawatts and the megawatt hours. There's a lot of factors that you need to factor in that perhaps we don't talk about on a general basis. Which is hard. It's good to know. I think I talked a lot, but these are some sort of general conclusions that we need to think about as a TSO at all times. System stability, making sure that lights are on at all times. From a system perspective, we need to be able to generate the power at all times that we need. Having a grid which is adequate to move the power. What we do is transport power from one place to another. That's all we do as a TSO. We need to accurately predict energy consumption because that's a factor that sort of weighs in on what we should be doing when we plan our grid investments and so on. Sweden has the ambition to continue to be a powerhouse of Northern Europe, to continue exporting electricity as well. So that's sort of a little bit around the system perspective. Now I'm moving to offshore wind. Are you with me? Great. Yes? Yeah. All right, you still hear me? Good. Great. So the offshore market in Sweden, now we're getting closer to my field of expertise. So I've managed to get through the first part without making too many mistakes. In Sweden, we have a different political system and ambition when it comes to offshore wind. There's not a central planning where we do zones where companies can bid to develop wind power and own it. It's a completely free market where anyone can start developing a project anywhere in the ocean. It's up to them, and then in the end, there's a competition of whether or not you get your permits to build it. So from a TSO perspective, it's a little bit more difficult to plan, you can imagine. We are not a body that sort of has anything to say about whether or not you get a permit. We are just there to provide a connection point as soon as possible, basically. This means that the market is very interesting. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of projects in these colored zones, as you see. There's 120 plus gigawatts. Some are overlapping, developers being in the same area of the sea. So if you take that away, it's around 90, 95 gigawatts of projects. Some projects are really mature and soon to be realized. Some are very early stages. But one of the things that every developer do is to make sure that they are on our lists to be able to get a grid connection at one point in time. So that's why we have a very good feeling for how big is the market out there from a TSO perspective. Very interesting, of course, to see this development and what will happen in the end. What we have done as a TSO, we realized that we cannot provide connection points to all these projects or even plan for it in parallel because it's too much work. So we now have two systems running in parallel in order to provide power offtake to these wind farms. The one on top here is what we call the open door process. It's basically every operator that gets their permits can construct and build and pay for their connection point themselves. And we will make sure, to the best of our abilities, that we have a connection point onshore. I'll get back to the details of that a bit later on. But we also have a target from our government, which dictates what we do, to also provide offshore connection points. So we will stretch out the transmission grid to certain points offshore, to ensure that wind farms can connect easily to those points. If you look at the first process that we call open door, what we've done is that we've divided the waters around Sweden in 9 sectors. Each sector, we are in the process of developing a capacity map. So we will say that in, for instance, sector 9, there will be a possibility short-term to connect 2 gigawatts or whatever the number will be in the end. We will also strive to have a connection point onshore. Say, if you develop a wind farm, this is the physical location where you will connect to the national grid. And in order to, because the change here is that before, we used to take every developer's sort of in a sort of just time order. Whenever they came to us and said they wanted a connection, we'll start developing it, which could lead to that someone perhaps sits with a connection agreement with us, but they don't push the button and invest. And then someone else would like to invest, but we reserve the capacity for another party. So here we've taken a totally new game here and said that we are placing anyone who's interested to connect to us in a investor pool, which is transparent. Everyone will have to share certain information with each other and with us. And whoever gets their permits first will be able to connect to the grid. So it will be a fair competition in each zone here to sort of get their permits from the authorities. And then we will provide, according to what we say in the capacity map, a connection point and a available capacity. Which we think is, from our perspective, is a better way of doing it, because we don't want to be a party that sort of hinders the development here. It will be a fair race, and we will provide whoever wins sort of that race to be able to connect that zone. In addition to that, we have also targeted 6 points where we say that we will start to extend the transmission grid offshore. these points have been chosen from a number of parameters. One, of course, is where we have a high capacity to take in power in the actual grid onshore. And also, of course, trying to match where there's a lot of interest, where there's a lot of projects that are being developed. And also where you can see that there's a lot of points in the southern part of Sweden. We do have a deficit of energy in the southern part of Sweden. The northern part is where we produce a lot of hydro, and we, as the TSO, transport it quite long distances and would like to sort of have a counterbalance in the south. So we try to sort of promote that by also providing connection points offshore, which hopefully it's easier and also a bit cheaper for the developers to reach that point. This is, of course, a process which is quite recently been introduced. So we have a few things that sort of hinders us, or whatever you want to call it, in that ambition. And that's why we have these orange dots in the end. There we have already reserved capacity for certain developers. They've come so far in the open door process, so they have already reserved capacity. So we're now in talks with those parties to see if they are willing to give up that reservation and perhaps then getting a chance to connect offshore with the less investment. But that's a decision and a negotiation which is ongoing. So those are the ambitions from Svenska Kraftnät being the TSO. And I think I will stop there. Yeah.
Very good. Open door policy on connections, was it?
Yeah.
Very good. Any questions? I see already 3. Yeah, I think behind there first, and then over there, or maybe first here. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So
difficult to.
My name is Mikko Heikkilä. I'm from Finnish TSO Fingrid. Thanks for the very interesting presentation. You had recently elections in Sweden, and I understood that the new government is more pro-nuclear and not so much for offshore wind. So do you expect any changes in that respect, that your guidance from the government could change?
It's not up to me to speculate in that. Yes, there's been an ambition to, I would say, add nuclear to the sort of the energy landscape in Sweden, rather than to remove wind and then add nuclear. I think what we see from a sort of system perspective, if we look at the market outlook, is that anything that we can put into the system in order to make sure that the whole of society transforms into a new kind of new kind of system is needed. So from our perspective, it's not we don't have an opinion on how you make the power, because we are just transporting it in the first place. But I think the question here is not really either or. It's actually we need both in some extent. And that I think as well has been expressed by the government, although they have emphasized quite a lot around nuclear in their communication. But right now, that's we as being a sort of a bit technocratic authority, we have a mission that we are now working on, and then if the politicians will change that, then we'll have to adapt to that. That's how we see upon it. Yeah.
It's probably correct.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, I saw one hand behind here. I think that you were first, actually. So you.
Hello, Peter Trejalt from Fermi Energy. Who pays the cost of the connections? The developer 100%, or something is included for the tariff for the whole society?
Exactly, very good question. Well, I don't know if I can back on this. These ones are to be expected to be paid on the general tariff. So that's why we are now. I wouldn't say we are so far that we have completely 100% knowledge about all factors here. But our ambition is, of course, to make that a strategic investment that provides energy which is good for general society. So those parts will be paid on the tariffs by us, basically.
I will take one more question, and then I have to close.
Thank you. You said that big structural changes are ahead. in terms of size of enterprise and in terms of ownership of enterprise? What kind of role do you see for a municipality, state, private, small scale, large scale? What are the future changes in Sweden?
Oof. The short answer is I don't know. But I think if I understood your thinking, your question, I think what we need to do in a general level in order to accommodate this, because as I see it, and I think as many of you agree, this is not a matter of that we want to do this because it's fun or someone makes money. We need to do a transition of society completely over the globe in order to change our climate. So we need also to think in new terms. It's not just a matter of business as usual, because these graphs I showed with the increase of consumption, for instance, it's in 20 years. We've been developing the power system in Sweden since the 1910s, more or less. So over 100 years, we reached 140 terawatt hours of production and consumption. And now in 20 years, we'll double that. So I mean, the challenge is massive in many aspects. So we need also to really try to question and develop new ways of doing this. And don't know if it answers your question, but I think it's we need also everyone. I mean, it's developers, it's municipalities, the societies in general. We need to step up to the challenge and say, yes, this is the overarching goal. This is more important than other parts, perhaps. We need to dare to prioritize this one.
Okay, I think some questions might be difficult because the questions are going outside the mandate of your company. So
yeah, exactly, and also my expertise.
But it's thank you very much, Niclas, again, and we go on in the program.
If you have more questions, I'll be around all day. So
yeah, in the coffee break.
Yeah.
Okay, then we continue in the program, and I'm glad to invite Lizet Ramirez from Wind Energy Europe. It's very good that you are here, and you will probably give the European perspective on offshore wind in the future. So I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, everyone. I am delighted to be here with you in this morning. For those of you who don't know, actually, today is a Belgian holiday, so I took the freedom to be here. I really want to tell you what is happening in Europe in offshore wind, but most importantly, what is the role that the Nordics and the Baltics have in this European story for offshore wind. So I am from Wind Europe. Wind Europe is the largest trade association representing the onshore and offshore supply chain. We have almost 500 members that are active in 35 countries worldwide. And myself, I am Lizet Ramirez. I am analyst for offshore wind. So really, my expertise is turbines at sea. Today, we have, well, this was by June, we had 28.4, now the number is about 30 gigawatts of capacity installed in European waters. This is providing approximately 3 to 4% of Europe's electricity demand today. So it's still very little, but this is going to change very quickly. Most of the wind farms, and this is a map where you see that actually there are a lot of projects, but most of them are in a planning phase or are under permitting. In fact, 99% of the capacity we have online is only in the North Sea, the Baltic, and the Irish. This should fundamentally change as well. How the Nordic countries contribute to this, because at the moment the Baltic states don't have offshore wind, is with 2.5 gigawatts. This is about 9% of the total installed capacity. As you see, Denmark has the most predominant capacity from this. Most of it is then in Denmark. It was also the country who initiated offshore wind. So offshore wind is really a success story, and we're very proud of it. But how did it actually happen there were several factors that needed to come into play for this to happen. So I want to take you now, I'm actually 30 years, so I'm going to take you back to more or less when I was born, and let's travel back in time. Vindeby was the first offshore wind farm in the world. And I apologize because I see that the wording, well, the sizes are a bit shorter for the format of my presentation, but I will talk you through it. So the first wind farm in the world, it was the whole project, almost 5 megawatts with 11 turbines. It is unbelievable to think that the whole size of this project is now less than the turbines we are installing on average for onshore and offshore wind. So there has been a huge increase and improvement thanks to the technology. First, with the turbines. This figure is showing you the average turbine capacity connected to the grid every year for the past 10 years. You also see some icons just to get a feeling of the size of these machines. In 10 years, we have tripled the size of the turbine. If we looked at about in 2010, we were on 3 megawatts average. Last year, it was almost 9. So it is really the turbine technology that has been one of the main drivers of the cost. The second is the wind farms itself. Projects are now double the size that 10 years ago. If you see here, about 2010, we were in 400 megawatts, and now it is reaching the point where 1 gigawatt is a common size for a wind farm. In fact, Europe has today the record for the largest wind farm operational in the world. It is located in the UK, and the size is in total 1.3 gigawatts. To set a perspective, this is the size comparable in capacity to a nuclear power plant, or is actually twice the size of an average gas-fired combined cycle power plant. So the solutions are there. The technology is there. And this is how offshore wind is now on top of all of the political agendas, because it brings, not yet, one most important factor is the fact that governments have supported the development of this technology to the point that we have it today. This would have not been possible with without the introduction of auctions. Competitive auctions changed the whole picture for offshore wind. Here you see the evolution from roughly 2014 to 2019. This is the results or the strike price from offshore wind. There is a steady decline, and actually no one could ever predict how fast offshore wind was going to reduce its cost. I mean, the technology started with perhaps a tariff, feed-in tariff. It has evolved into a one-sided CFD, but most importantly, now we have two-sided CFDs, which seem to be the best way to finance offshore wind, is giving returns to governments too. This is how the UK has done it. So, I was saying then, what is now the role then on offshore wind? It is part of the political agenda of almost every country that has a sea. And governments want much more wind than we have today. This happened this year, not too many months ago, that both the ministers of the North Seas and the Baltic Sea have committed, respectively, to build 76 gigawatts and 20 gigawatts by the end of this decade. This is huge. It means together, they will deliver almost 100 gigawatts of capacity if they do this on time. But more countries want to do offshore wind because it's not only the North Sea and the Baltic. We have, of course, important players like Portugal, who might become a potential hot market in the coming years. Most importantly, the number when we consider the rest of the countries is 165 gigawatts. This is a fivefold compared to what we have installed today in a very short period of time. So what is the way to do this? Then the Nordic and Baltics will have a predominant role here as well, and they could now increase their share by the end of the decade to 12%. This is by delivering these 20 gigawatts that I've taken the freedom to break down. So still Denmark will be the most prominent market, mainly because of the inclusion of the 2 energy islands in the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. In second, we have that Norway, although it's not an official target, if the government puts these 2 areas out for auction next year, we consider they could easily be connected by 2030. Then we have Lithuania, who has just doubled the capacity that they have originally stated as part of the National Energy and Climate Plan, and this is great. We have, of course, also Estonia and Latvia, who are together looking into the feasibility of building this project for up to 2 gigawatts of capacity. And finally, Finland and Sweden. Well, why are they grayed out? They have a huge pipeline. In fact, we just heard from our previous speaker, 120 gigawatts are asking for permits, at least for the grid permit. But there are no targets from the government, and we do consider this a crucial part to give visibility to the rest of the sector. So now I want to use my time remaining to tell you some recommendations to each of these countries on how they can make the most on delivering these 20 gigawatts, but also on supporting the offshore wind sector for all of Europe. Let's start with floating wind. Today, Europe has most of the capacity installed in the world. We have 113 megawatts online. This is very little, in fact, but Europe could easily build 10 gigawatts by 2030, considering everything that has been, granted through seabed lease, targets from governments, etc. And this is a big, big opportunity for Norway. In fact, this photo is from Norway. Some of you might know this. So how can Norway make the most of it? They should really bring the auctions forward, so do them as soon as possible. Now, they have 2 areas, for those of you who don't know. One is a bottom fixed area, and one is a floating area. The bottom fixed area should prioritize on understanding how they can export the electricity of the phase 2, which is 1.5 gigawatts. It's a lot. And they should also see the floating side as a way to promote the industrialization of floating, because then they can also export this technology, the mass production of foundations, of dynamic cables and other components that are only for floating to the rest of Europe and the world. In today's context, the corporates need affordable, clean energy more than ever. This is an example of a German wind farm whose capacity, 87%, is at the moment support with power purchase agreements, which have a fixed price between the buyer and the seller. As you see, most of the capacity was bought by Amazon, but the interesting part here is also not the size, but how they are helping sectors that are hard to electrify or hard to abate. Like in this case, we have BASF with a very long-term PPA of 25 years. So this is an example that Sweden could learn lessons from. By setting first a country target, we see that they can support the development of offshore wind. They really need then also to have a framework and an auctions timetable, if possible, or how are they going to offer this? And finally, if there is so much capacity, 120 gigawatt, maybe some overlaps, but they should look into the potential of either exporting or using this for corporates or producing renewable hydrogen, which is also now on top of the agenda for the EU. Auctions. We have recently, the stated guidelines have changed from a price model, which is a race to bottom on price, to a value to society. They allow now up to 30% of the evaluation criteria. This is basically how do you decide on the winner for a project, to be using non-price criteria. These are our 3 main recommendations to everyone who is considering to do non-price criteria. And definitely to avoid the negative bidding, because this will ultimately bring higher costs to developers that need to be passed on to consumers. So we advise to Lithuania that they reconsider the auction design they are proposing. At the moment, it considers an uncapped negative bidding in the model. They should use contracts for difference instead. The UK government is now getting a lot of money back from all of these developers who signed CFDs at prices of 50 or a bit higher. And they should look to cooperate with the other Baltic states, mainly because there is a huge potential for having offshore hybrids, which is wind farms connected to more than one country. Now, none of this will be possible if we don't support the expansion of the European supply chain. For those of you who don't know, for the next 3 years, almost all of the foundation manufacturers are fully booked. We also know that in Europe, we can manufacture 7 gigawatts worth of turbines every year. So at some point in time, we want to install more that we are able to manufacture. We also know that vessels might be a bottleneck as soon as 2024 or 2025. These need investments from all fronts, and of course the ports. We need space to put all of these larger components to decommission the turbines. So Denmark should really go into not only having a big target, which is great already, but they should support the expansion of the supply chain. And this also can be done through the auction design, because they have to award a lot of volume in a very short time, so they should frame this in the best way possible. And of course, they should not overlook the grid, because they want to bring 2 energy islands by 2030 online. I'm almost done. I know you are looking at me, time-wise. One-stop shop, which means having a single authority permitting and consenting the offshore wind farms, is the most efficient way to do wind. This is proven, especially when you combine this also with digital services like the Netherlands. This is something that Finland can still learn from. We suggest, first of all, that they set a country target for offshore wind, and that they are already on the making of this one-stop shop authority. And finally, it's not only a target, but it's the framework and auctions to be offered. And finally, the offshore hybrids. So offshore hybrids are when you connect a wind farm to more than one country. Why is this important, or why is it attractive? We make a better and efficient use of the space. We have less cables, we have less landing points, and we also increase the interconnectivity of countries. So it's really a great way to do offshore wind in the future, much more coordinated. Today we only have one offshore hybrid. It is a Kriegers flag, but this was not done with the most cost savings possible because there was not enough planning. So what we recommend to Estonia and Latvia is first to formalize if they will increase their targets, the country targets, to look at the best auction design for this L-Wind project, and of course to plan the grid fit for purpose. So to conclude, what is this opportunity that Nordic and Baltic states can take forward to deliver on this 20 gigawatt plus support the European offshore wind supply chain and the sector? There is already a good progress on setting wind as a formal target, but not all of the countries have done this. There is a revision for all countries mandatory in 2023 for the national energy and climate plans, and this should be used as an opportunity for the countries left. In terms, together with the regulatory framework. Then, Identifying areas is something that is done mostly in good shape because most countries have already done the maritime special plan. But not all of them have set a timetable. This means when and how much volume will be offered for developers. And of course, with a good auction design, and I will repeat again that we really advise on not going into a negative bidding system, but into using the auction to bring the best value to society. And finally, these three, which have a lot of work for space for improvement, setting the one-stop shop in all countries. This will just make things more efficient, planning the on and offshore grid, and supporting the expansion of the supply chain, ports, and innovation. Thank you very much, and I am happy to take questions if there is any time.
Thank you very much, Lizet, and also for the concrete recommendations for our countries. Any question? Please.
Thank you for the presentation. The last slide was interesting. So, what is your? I mean, it's good to say that okay, you should develop your port infrastructure and that kind of stuff. But in general, are there any concrete steps that Estonia should do that to attract those investments to Estonia? What do you think? Did you hear me?
Yes, I heard you. Steps concrete for Estonia to attract the investors. Well, we see that Estonia is at the moment, they have a pipeline of projects, but they also don't have a specific larger targets. It's something that it's set, but it's not set in stone in a way. So the first thing is really to commit to a target, so not only as part of the Baltic Sea collaborative target, but as a country target. This is always good. And then secondly, the earlier that the government asks for an industry view on, okay, what do you guys want? Then the government will be able to get the best of the auctions. And this basically means asking early enough, committing, well, not committing, but engaging with both the society and the developers, which will be the main actors in this process. And then the whole financing will just come through as a natural part of the process. But if at the beginning you don't understand then what is the need of both parties, you cannot design all of these auctions in the best way.
So it's like a chicken and egg thing that if we don't close this, Elwind project, for instance, so nobody will start investing. But anyway, we all know that train is already leaving and we are just standing in the station. I mean, is it the situation at the moment?
Well, first of all, Elwind should not be the only project I think that Estonia should be looking at. Same example that I gave for Sweden, they could, if they have a space for more, which I know they have potential, they should look at other possible uses for the electricity. So, of course, the priority is to decarbonize, or let's say to bring electricity, clean electricity to the society. That should be the first priority of Estonia. If they can meet that with the 1 gigawatt, fine, and they should not stop there. Like they should look at, okay, maybe Poland, who will be a big industrial, maybe they will even increase their consumption with all of the building of the wind farms. So how can we support Poland? We can maybe actually give them electricity for decarbonizing their hard to electrify. If they have plans for hydrogen, you can export the hydrogen, etc. So it is very important when you say attracting the financing, it has to be a continuation. It's not something that you can make like a one-off, because then it will be hurting the supply chain, like it has happened in Germany for a few years, that there were no installations at all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have to go to the next speaker.
Yeah, no problem.
It was excellent overview. So, applaud. And then I will introduce Mikko Heikkilä from Finland, Head of Strategic grid planning in Fingrid, the Finnish TSO, view on offshore grid in the region.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It's been really inspiring 2 days. We have heard excellent speakers and presentations, and maybe quick introduction to my role. So me and my team are responsible for the long-term and sort of a high-level grid planning at Fingrid. So we are looking into the crystal ball and trying to understand where the market is going, what are the needs of the society, and so on. We are also responsible for the international grid planning cooperation and doing a lot of activities in the Baltic Sea region. I'm gonna talk a bit about the offshore wind development and our perspectives on that, but I'm also going to open a bit our process, how we actually do the grid planning in Finland. And I'm also trying to answer to the question that was evident in the Lizet's presentation, that why Finland has almost zero figures or transparent figures in the policy goals for the offshore development. If I start from the big picture, so even though our policy goals for the offshore wind are transparent or non-existent, we might be the best place in the EU to increase the green electricity, and especially when you want to do it fast. Finland is quite a big country in terms of size, so we are roughly the same size of Germany, but we are only a bit more than 5 million people, whereas in Germany there's some 80 million people. So we are actually the most sparsely populated country in the EU. And this is an advantage, of course, when it comes to the utilization of the onshore energy. We do have a quite long coastline, so there's plenty of possibilities for offshore wind, and the sea is fairly shallow, so it's possible to build offshore wind fairly close to the coastline, actually. Our wind conditions, they are not the best in the Europe, but they are still quite competitive. And one good thing from the investor's perspective is that you can build very tall onshore wind farms in Finland. So the tip height of the new installations is around 300 meters. That's and then basically it's more efficient, more cheaper, and so on. And these possibilities are something that we are seeing at Fingrid every day. So basically the investors are knocking our door all the time. We have received more than 200 gigawatts of grid connection inquiries. This is quite big number. So Finland, our peak load is around 14, 15 gigawatts. So we are talking about huge potential here. Out of that 200 gigawatt number, it's mostly onshore wind, so maybe some 130 gigawatts of onshore wind. But surprisingly, the solar is actually going up as well. So now we are talking about some 35 gigawatts of solar connection inquiries to our grid. It's quite surprisingly that Finland as a northern and dark and gloomy country, solar is there as well, but the price level is declining so rapidly, and we are seeing the first transmission grid level type of or scale solar investments. And when it comes to the offshore wind, we are now having around 30 gigawatts of connection inquiries. And Fingrid's numbers, they don't actually include the Åland Islands because they have their own TSO, but around the Åland Islands there is at least 10 gigawatts of more inquiries. And everything is basically happening without the subsidies. and that's of course nice thing for the taxpayers, but it's also nice thing for the industry. There is no subsidies anymore for the offshore wind or onshore wind or anything like that. So in a way, the market is working, and now because of the energy crisis, the speed is actually accelerating. So even more inquiries are made during this time and high power prices. So we have estimated at Fingrid that Finland would be able to produce at least 300 terawatt hours of new, clean, and actually competitive electricity. So of course the solar and wind are the cheapest way to produce the electricity. So our future outlook looks really good, and Finland should be a good place for the industrial investments based on the green electricity. Now I'm going to talk about a bit how we are actually doing the grid planning. So me and my team are responsible for the vision type of work. So every second year we are doing a network vision. My slides are based on our old vision from 21, and currently we are updating the scenarios, and I can tell you that the basically all the numbers are going up from the 21 numbers, so there's more demand for the clean electricity, but there's also more interest in building. But that's still on the planning table, so these are the scenarios from a couple of years ago. So what we are doing typically 4 scenarios for the future, and they are all a bit different in the nature. So we are trying to find scenarios that are in a way internally consistent, so they create a credible world, but they also need to be somehow challenging for us. So we want to test that what would be a test for the power system, and how we should then try to answer to that test. So here's the scenarios from the last round. So we had, for example, scenario called power to export, where Finland becomes the exporter country. Then we had very high growth scenario called climate neutral growth. So there we were a good country to get the industrial investments as well. So not just exporting the power, but get the industry close to the green energy. Then we had a offshore wind scenario with plenty of offshore wind, and that's a challenge for the system. And then we had one scenario on the where we had a lot of small-scale production like solar and then batteries. And each of these are a bit different kind of a challenge for the power system. And what is common for our scenarios is the high growth rate of electricity consumption. But then it depends, of course, from scenario to scenario, that how much the rates are actually going up. So there are several drivers that are increasing the consumption. We have estimated the carbon neutrality target of Finland. So Finland wants to be carbon neutral by 35, which is very soon actually. So we have estimated that would alone increase the consumption by 30%. Currently, Finland is using some 80 terawatt hours of electricity in a year, and in 35 that would be then 30% more. But if Finland becomes a good place for the new power-intensive industry, hydrogen production, and so on, we can see even doubling the consumption already in the 2030s. So there's several drivers for the consumption increase. It's not only about the industry, but it's in our case the heating sector. So we are still using fossil fuels in some cities in Finland. So basically all the usage of the fossil fuels in the heating has to end, and what is done is that they are getting replaced by utilizing the electricity, either with the direct this kind of electric boilers or with heat pumps. Transport sector, there we also see need for new electricity and increasing the increase of consumption. But actually, when you are talking about the terawatt numbers, the transport sector is not consuming that much electricity compared to the other drivers. But the point is that there are several drivers for the electricity growth, and even if some of the drivers would fail or come a bit slower, we can still be fairly confident that the consumption will grow significantly. Here's our scenarios for the power production. So in the different scenarios, we try to vary the production portfolio, and we are also varying the location where the assets are located. So that's of course very relevant for grid planning to know where your assets are and which assets to connect. Here you can see especially the wind disease scenario. So that's our offshore wind scenario. There we had 10 gigawatts of offshore wind in 35 and 20 gigawatts 45. We have also small, roughly 1 gigawatt of offshore wind actually in all scenarios. So in a way, our base case is already that we are preparing for that as well. But the main driver in most of the scenarios is the onshore wind, and because that's already happening, we see it every day. Finland has now about 5 gigawatts of onshore wind installed capacity in 25, so in 3 years it's going to be 10 gigawatts, and this is already projects that are going on and where the connection agreements are made. And currently we are estimating that by 2030 the onshore wind capacity of Finland is around 20 gigawatts. So we are building 1.52 gigawatts of onshore wind every year during the 2020s. Okay, let's see how these slides work. I have some animations here, and yesterday there were some problems. But here's the example of the wind disease scenario from the grid perspective. So with the blue markers, you see where we have assumed the offshore wind to be. So basically it's the west coast of Finland. Then with the green one, you can see where we have assumed the new onshore wind to be located, and with the red areas, they are marking the expected consumption growth. And when we are simulating these different scenarios, we are first utilizing the market model, but then we are simulating the grid for each of the scenarios. Now with the arrows, you will see the main transmission directions. So we are seeing a lot of transmission needs from the northern part of the country to the south, where the most of the consumption is. So some 60% of Finnish consumption today is here, close to capital region. So there's a lot of need to transfer electricity from north to south. And in this scenario, we are seeing a lot of a need for transferring electricity basically from the coastline to the mainland. So from west to east as well. And by simulating that and modeling the grid, we have identified that in this wind disease scenario, which is based on 10 gigawatts of offshore wind, we would need to build that kind of an investment. So the gray lines are showing the new 400 kV grid that we would need to build in this case. So you see that the There's a lot of investments coming from north to south, but also from west coast to the other parts of the country. And this is how we do it. So we are doing similar study for each of the 4 scenarios, and then on those grid solutions where the solutions basically overlap, so where we need similar type of investments in 3 or even all 4 scenarios, those are something that we call them as a no-brainer investment. So whatever the future actually is, you should do at least those ones. And here in this picture you see the so-called no-brainer investments on the left side. So those we need whatever the future is, and these we will now include our investment program. So every TSO is doing a 10-year investment program, and we are doing that as well, and these investments are now there. But then by doing that kind of analysis, we are also identifying a lot of grid investments that are needed maybe in 1 scenario or 2 scenario. And those you can see on the right-hand side with the purple. And this is something that now we are in a way preparing for that kind of a scenario. So in case the future would go to that direction, as pointed out in the scenario, we have already identified the high-level solution. So for example, you can see that currently it's not possible to build onshore wind in the eastern part of the country, because onshore wind and the radars of the defense forces, it's not a good match. But in one of the scenarios we made, we assumed that this problem can be solved, and the eastern part of the country can be utilized also for onshore wind. And on those scenarios, we identified that we actually need significant reinforcements of the grid in the east, and you can see the example there. So this is in a way our high-level approach to the grid planning. And here's an example of our investment program. So we are doing a lot. We have increased our investment program from, I think, still 2-3 years ago. We were expecting to invest a bit more than 1 billion to the grid in the coming decade, but now we are seeing that we need to invest at least 3 billion euros to the Finnish grid during the next 10 years. And now it might be so that because of the energy crisis and the need to speed up everything, we need to invest even more. But anyways, we are doing a lot. So we are building more than 5,000 kilometers of new power lines in Finland in the coming decade. That, by the way, includes also the upgrades of the existing power lines. And we are doing about 200 substation projects. We are also looking at new interconnectors. So you might have heard about the Aurora line, which is the new interconnector to northern Sweden. We have just recently started to build it, and it should be ready during 2025. We are also investigating a second Aurora line to northern Sweden, and we are also looking at the Estlink 3 together with Elering. And we are targeting that the Aurora line and Estlink 3, they could be ready in early 2030s. Exact year is still unknown, but the work is going on. Here's a short summary what we actually expecting to see in the near future. We are seeing quite big changes in the power balances in the Baltic Sea region. Finland has been a long deficit country. We've been importing 20% of our electricity from Sweden and also from Russia, but that has now ended. And basically, actually, next year Finland will become balanced country. So on yearly level, we're gonna produce as much as electricity we are consuming, or we might be even a bit exporting. And in the longer run, 27, we are definitely gonna see the Finland as a surplus country and exporter country. At the same time, we are seeing that the surplus of Norway is a bit declining, and in the future, especially the southern Norway, we expect to become a deficit area, and this is, by the way, in line what Statnett is thinking. Baltics we at least used to see as a deficit area, but yesterday we heard new political goals of Estonia and Lithuania, which are quite ambitious. So we see a lot of new renewables coming in the Baltic countries, and it might be that we need to upgrade our or update our analysis when it comes to the Baltic countries. Okay, to conclude, when we are talking about offshore wind, so it's not only about drawing the lines to the sea, but we always have to consider the reinforcements of the onshore grid as well. This is the one power system, so everything needs to work together. So basically every case when you are installing 1 gigawatt or 2 gigawatt offshore wind farm, you also need to significantly reinforce the grid on land. And we are talking about maybe hundreds of millions of new investments, several power lines with that kind of a capacity. Having said that, it seems evident that we also need some new instruments how to steer the consumption so that it could locate close to the new generation assets, and this is especially true with the offshore wind. So it's quite likely that we need some financial incentive for the new consumption to locate on the coastline where the offshore wind is feed in to the system. That would at least speed up the process quite much. Now at Fingrid we are a bit thinking about our connection process. We have a good process that is working quite nicely with onshore energy, wind powers and solar, but it's not that well fit with the offshore wind, which has much longer lead times. So we are considering an upgrade there, maybe something similar that the Swedes have done. And maybe something to mention is also the regional grid planning cooperation. So we are talking about such big numbers here that installation of the capacity, it will always have also a cross-border effect, and regional planning is needed. And TSOs are working with this. So about a year ago, we reinforced our grid planning cooperation around the Baltic Sea, and that is moving forward. And of course, we are also cooperating in the ENTSO-E. And maybe the last point, especially from the Finnish perspective, that there is in a way a competition between the offshore wind and onshore assets, and this is also especially true when it comes to the reinforcement of the grid. So as we see it, that the utilization of the offshore wind shouldn't slow down the investments on land, because for the society, the building of onshore is typically faster, and it's way cheaper as well. All in all, Europe and Finland, we are not running out of the renewable potential, but we are running out of time. So we need to do the transition fast. We had to do it already fast last year because of the climate crisis, but now because of the energy crisis and getting rid of the Russian energy and replacing that, we have to do it even faster. Okay, thank you. I think I conclude there.
Thank you very much, Mikko. This is another example of the TSO coordinating itself with offshore wind developments. Should we take a few questions? We are a little bit over time, but we may have some questions. Yeah, Finnish embassy.
Thanks. Just to clarify, given that we're in Tallinn, you were talking about no-brainer investments in all your scenarios. I couldn't help but notice that there was a line from southern Finland to northern Estonia. So my question is, do you consider EstLink 3, which you're planning currently, as one of these no-brainer investments in all of your future scenarios? Thank you.
Yes, that's true. So EstLink 3 is already in our investment program, and we are moving forward with that. There is no investment decision yet, but the planning is going on, and we are looking the capacity, of course. So we are talking about, let's say, from 700 megawatt to 1 gigawatt. That's the ballpark, and then the actual year when that could be built is still a bit open. And of course, all the permitting and so on has to happen. But from the system perspective, it's indeed a no-brainer investment.
Yeah, and from Lizet.
Thank you. That was a very nice presentation. It's very interesting that you are doing all of these scenarios. Of course, all TSOs have to do it. I know there is a revision of bidding zone areas every 2 years or so, and you also have like the flows and how you think they're going to change. But then you consider that it will remain stable in terms of bidding zones, or do you think that it could potentially change over the future with the increase in renewables?
Yeah. So Finland is now one bidding zone, and that has been something that our customers, they basically love it. So it's quite stable investment environment because of having the same price in the whole country, and then the outlook is something that is easier to build your investment case on. So we really would like to keep that like that. We also have a legal obligation to plan Finnish grid in a way that it enables the single bidding zone. And as you can see, these no-brainer investments, and here many of them are from north to south, and that's the main trend. So we are putting quite much effort to invest the grid so that we can keep it like that. But of course, when it comes to the very high consumption growth scenario, when we are talking about more than 120 terawatt hours or so, we need some tools to direct the location of the consumption and production. Bidding zone split is one of those. It's maybe the most strongest one, but there is also other ways like locational tariffs, for example, or just some kind of a counter trade mechanisms. So short, we don't see a need for the bidding zone split in the 2020s, and this is not something that we are planning. Quite the contrary. But in the longer future, in the very high growth scenarios, it's of course something that can be considered.
Okay, I think we break for a short coffee now, brief coffee, and resume at 11:25.
Thank you.
Thanks.
the colors in my wildest fantasies, like an endless roller coaster ride. You surprise me so. Breaking down the walls again, breaking down my walls again, breaking down my walls again. I never thought I'd fly again. Hey little bird, hey little bird, let's fly away. Hey little bird, hey little bird, let's fly away. Breaking down the walls again, breaking down my walls again, breaking down my walls again. Breaking down the walls again, breaking down my walls again, breaking down my walls again. I never thought I'd fly again. Like the sunbeam on a winter's day, like the pale moon on a cloudless sky, like an echo on the hill that keeps repeating. You surprise me so. Hey little bird, hey little bird, let's fly away. Hey little bird, hey little bird, let's fly away.
Yes, I think we can continue with the session. The next speaker is Terje Talv, Estonian Wind Energy Association. Wind comes with storage, new normal? Question mark. So I give the floor to you, Terje.
Do you have the clicker?
The clicker is probably here.
Thank you.
So, hello. Welcome to Estonia, to everybody. I'm covering the side from Estonian developers and what is going on in Estonia, offshore wind, and a little bit wind all together. So, happy to see you, and let's start it. In Estonia, right now, is the perfect moment. We have in our government, there is our Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas, the Minister of Finance and Minister of Economics, who are really doing a good job, and Estonia is in the very nice way right now. The only bad side is that there will be new election in next year, March. So I'm keen believer in democracy, but this time I'm like really feeling that maybe we should just skip it, do it for next year, next 4 years, and then it's little bit better if I look at this from wind side. As it in the slide, we have really ambitious plan to go all green, and we are doing our best. So there was a presentation when someone says that our problems are coming from Russian gas and a lack of it. Actually, Russian gas is important, but not so big amount of Estonian energy mix. Our problem is close to the Russian border. It's not a problem, it's an opportunity. We have in Estonia produced our electricity from oil shale for many, many years. And Estonia has been the electricity exporter. And now, after year 2019, the CO prices went up and the production of oil shale energy went down. And that means that this green line is all electricity need that we have in Estonia, domestic needs. The red line is how much we produce electricity from oil shale, basically, and the yellow line is how much we are producing green electricity in Estonia. Right now, in Estonia, we are producing about half what we need every single day. It's not enough for Estonia, it's not enough, it's the security issues, the safety issues, it's not good positions to be. If we jump to the green electricity and thinking what we can do to increase this amount, then most of our green electricity has been coming from biomass, and it's most of that is heating and electricity co-production, and it has been a good source for Estonian going green. Right now is that the situation is that there is not much new developments in that side because all Estonian biggest cities, major cities, are covered already, and also there is some issues about biomass altogether in all European Union. So it's no way to increase in that level. It's the yellow lines in these graphics. So the wind has been in Estonia modest, 320 megawatts for last decade. And the solar is increasing. But for example, we are Nordic country, and last year there was only 8 hours of solar energy in December. So we cannot only live in the 8 hours in December in Estonia, we have to live other times also. So if you look at this both graphic, then you understand the wind is the place to go in Estonia, is our first way to succeed. This conference is about offshore wind, but I will jump just for a moment to the onshore wind, because onshore wind is our first need, and onshore will be producing electricity much sooner than offshore. So there is a timetable what's going to be our next targets, and there is sitting Utilitas Wind, who just this week put the cornerstone to their new onshore park. And this picture is our government decision about radars. There is one radar in here, the darker green, the first radar, and the second radar is covering all Estonia, almost over Estonia mainland. And the red line is basically what we're thinking about Russia. This slide is not from this year, this picture. It has been this way. It was announced last year, middle of the year. So our understanding what is Russia and how we cannot go closer to the Russia border is always been in Estonian minds. So that is what we are doing right now in onshore. And now we are jumping to the offshore. There are 3 first wave projects in Estonia. There is Saare Wind Energy, there is Eesti Energia, and next to that is Utilitas. They all are said that they're gonna produce electricity by year 2028. That is our golden silver lining over there. That is the way we are going. Our onshore will be producing electricity sooner, but 2028 is the actual date when we can be relaxed in Estonia because we are producing more electricity that is absolutely needed in Estonia. So about the amounts what's gonna be produced in Estonia offshore, the first wave project. Saare Wind is, they all are a little bit more than 1 gigawatts, and the producing electricity is 4 and up terawatt hours per year. Estonian need right now is a little bit less than 9 terawatt hours. So it means that first 2 parks will cover Estonian needs. But as we are just starting the process, then we have to provide, push all these projects because we don't know if all of them will succeed. So we can't choose that we are supporting this project or this project. 3 are equal. They all need our support. They have support from the government. Our government right now understands why we need all these 3 parks. Our government is doing the best to provide the connection points to the land when the offshore wind parks can connect. So it's the first 3 parks are our first priority at all levels. So, but now we are going a little bit further. So we have our 3 projects. And they are going. We had announced earlier this year our MSP. So all other areas in Estonia also have been decided. And all Estonian MSP is saying that altogether Estonia capacity in offshore wind is 9 gigawatts. It's more than our domestic electricity need, but I will go there. So our MSP is announced. We are preparing the legislation. So Estonia, there is no offshore wind parks right now. So we actually can go and build up offshore wind parks, go outside and build wind parks in the sea. And also about the MSP, if I go back, it's a west side of Estonia. Estonia is bigger. There is a lot of space, a lot of sea space in the north side of Estonia. But mainly because of Russia, we decided the safest place for our offshore wind parks are the west side. For developer side, it's much more easier to go and build something in the north because the grid connection is closer, there is good ports, there is good depth, there is everything that one offshore wind will need. But our decision as a nation was that we are going to the west. So there will be applications. There is an application to to other areas that are announced by MSP, and there will be an auction. The auction will be early next year, and our ministry is preparing this legislation right now. And there is already more than 30 companies who are applied to Estonian offshore areas. There are this marked areas. So it's a big competition. I'm CEO of Estonian Estonian Wind Power Association, and our members are growing. So we have already like 30 members. We started with 14 or something. So it's a big interest for Estonia. Like all the biggers are joining us, and from Norway, for example, Aker is joined us. There is Ervi, Total, Siemens, not Siemens Gamesa of course, but other developers who are active in this region, and they all are interesting to coming to Estonia. There is 3 projects. There is locations that will be put to auctions, and there is Elvind. Elvind is a joint project with Latvia, and the Latvian side of Elvind is this green wind turbine, and Estonia is this blue one. And if you think about that it's a joint project with Latvia, the first idea is that it's located like near or next to each other. But in this case, it's located 2 different locations, and the nice white lines in this map are connections, the grid connections. And the grid connections is the best part of Elvind, because Elvind altogether is about 1 gigawatt, 500 megawatts here, 500 megawatts in Latvia, but they are not going to be probably the first one, but the connection points, and that the government will put money into this project and provide these connections, and the connection with other connection with Latvia. We already have 2 interconnection with Latvia. That is the main and most beautiful thing about this project. This project altogether will be auctioned out, I think, 2026, and it's a pre-developed area. All other projects in Estonia are like greenfield project. So it's a little bit different, and the good side is the connections. So, and if I jump a little bit further to the connection, then I listen to people from DSOs. And I have to say I'm really glad not to be part in Estonian DSO, because it's not the easiest place to be. So we have reduced our electricity from oil shale over here, and our wind parks gonna be over here. So it's all the good lines are located in direction from east to the west. Now our DSO has done really good job, and they have been developments that they are building up lines from north to the south, but also now they have to go from deep west to the east, and it's not even like, it's island of Hiiumaa, they even don't have national grid. So, and the grid isn't the best one. So now they have to go from here to there. So it's an enormous task. And it's not like we can do it like 1 year or 2 years. So the timeline is 2028. And we are really hoping that everything will be ready in Estonia, so we can connect our 2 wind parks. And I don't care which one is it. Is it Eesti Energia, is it Utilitas, or is it Saare Wind Energy? When there is offshore wind parks in Estonia, we can connect them in 2028, and we as a country can be safe in Estonia. So that is our main bottleneck right now. We can do our best, but it takes time and it takes wise decisions, because there is not enough resources to just go and build everything in Estonia. So, but if our 3 first projects are ready, our L-wind is auctioned out and also ready, and all other areas, altogether 9 gigawatts, are built, then it's more than enough electricity for Estonia. So, what are we going to do? The first main goal for Estonia right now is get covered our domestic electricity needs. So, if that is done, then we can be safe. Our second aim is sell our electricity mostly to Finland and Latvia. There is interconnection with these countries, and there are going to be more interconnections. That is the second part. Maybe also Sweden is part of this business. So Sweden is not so far from our wind parks. So and all the Baltic grid is the next big step, I think, for all countries. So after that, of course, is hydrogen, because if there is produced so much electricity, there is no meaning and no need to push all this electricity to the Estonian grid, and because there is no consumption. So there is there is plans to go hydrogen. So maybe in the future, if you are coming to Estonia, over our transport, public transport, is run by hydrogen, so we can exit oil and gas. So that is our second idea. And it's depending which going to be first, ready first. Is it our national hydrogen supply and use for hydrogen, like the points where we can do the distribution for hydrogen in Estonia? Is the hydrogen part will be ready, or will be the connection points to for electricity ready for next? So it's for all developers, it's the main issue, not the main issue. The next, but really good and nice question to ask is what is the next step? Is it electricity? Is it hydrogen? And of course, somewhere in the way is hydrogen backbone, and if we are producing so much electricity, then it's more than welcome to sell it out to the maybe more western and south side of Europe. So let's say that 2028 is our first target, then it's 2030. And 35 or maybe 2040 is the time when Estonia can be green electricity-wise, green by transport or hydrogen-wise, and also be the good source for every partner outside, not outside, inside in Europe. So, and that was it.
Thank you very much. Nice. And questions to Terje, Talv? Yes, I can see 2 hands. Behind first.
Hello. Peter Trail from Fingrid. Question, why should I build electricity production in 30 if I'll have, say, hydrogen and I can sell it only in 40? Why shouldn't I wait until 40? Because in 30, as I understand, Lithuania will be exporting, Estonia will be exporting, and Finland will be exporting if we look today's and yesterday's presentations.
I think we can decide as we go, because right now there isn't any hydrogen production in the region. Not much anyway, there is small project. So as we go, we can decide. And whatever is coming first, then there we will be going. So it's decided by needs. But I have to say that it's not only producing electricity, it's also hydrogen, so it makes it so much wider. So it's the needs are so much bigger because we are also going to hydrogen. And we will go as then we see which one we should do. Andres, you had a question?
I don't have mic. Thank you. It was very nice presentation, and Actually, we were discussing with a person from Norwegian embassy that we have a problem. Everybody are talking about something. It's like elephant in the room, but nobody's actually noticing it. So I'm not gonna go deeper, but I'm really frustrated. I've been in energy business like 9 years. I worked for the VKG. So now I'm working for the government attracting foreign direct investments, and actually I can't attract any investments because I don't have the platform for that. So what is your suggestion to Ministry of Economic Affairs, what they should do? Just small baby steps. Thank you.
What is the baby step?
Can you ask something else? So, yeah, I know, I understand, and we have talked about this earlier so many times, but what I have to say is Estonia is not the biggest country. So all these people that we have are the people who we have. So we can be partners to each other, but what is needed from Estonia is maybe the clear understanding and clear platform. What is the timeline? What are the numbers? Estonia, of course, has announced, but we are flirting with the idea to go nuclear. We are flirting with the idea to maybe be a little bit passive and just watch and see. But as I said, our government right now is the best. If there is elections in March, just go and put your vote to the right box. Of course, but if you are sitting behind your computer, put your ticket, select the right person. I think it's so dependent on who is running us, because there was a gap in Estonia for 10 years. Now we are starting over. And if there is not support from the highest political level, it's really difficult to do. You are not happy about it. Okay, let's continue.
No, I am good. I'm good. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, I think we should like waste a little bit taxpayers' money and start promoting something. I mean, do you have any money there in the association account to do some promotion or something, lobbying or whatever?
Do Estonian investors have any money for that?
We have. Yes, we have all the taxpayers' money actually. So,
is there any direction from your question?
Okay, let's work with the idea. I mean, there is something, I guess. All right. Okay, no question, actually.
No. It's a comment. I think one more question behind Lizet, Ramirez.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It was fantastic, and it's all great news from Estonia. Maybe a bit of a reflection, as the title of your presentation was, if wind and storage should be like the new normal. But then when you show the roadmap on, and I fully agree that first you tackle the domestic electricity consumption, then you said exporting electricity and renewable hydrogen consumption, and then exporting hydrogen. But I think you really miss the link on maybe not being too prescriptive on the storage solution, because hydrogen, it's actually better to use it for directly as a feedstock, which there is a certain demand. But then wouldn't you think that it makes sense to tackle the domestic electricity consumption together with storage, which can be different ways? It's not necessarily only hydrogen.
Yeah, but it was a tricky question with a question mark. It's we have made analysis, and there is in one day in January, maybe day and a half, when our offshore wind cannot provide enough electricity for Estonia. So we are really good condition, we are really good location, we are great area for offshore wind. If we go and build up our couple of wind parks, then we are on the safe side. So the storage is, of course, it's in the picture, and it's developed. There is a different project, but Estonia is so small that we actually can be pretty happy without like really large amount of storage. So it was the joke about this presentation, because we actually don't need storage, because there is enough wind in our areas, so we can happily cover everything that we are needing, and there is some extra.
Okay, I think that makes up the questions. I think we can say thank you very much. And then we have the last speaker today, and I very much appreciate the presence of Iceland and Mr. Hjalti Páll Ingólfsson to speak on geothermal energy. Iceland is actually the European champion in renewable energy, the highest renewable share. I think 85% or something. Yes. Probably you will mention it.
Yes.
So heat transition, geothermal potential for Europe, experience from Iceland. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will do my best to be quick, but it will take more than 5 minutes. Sorry about that, but please bear with me. So yes, I want to speak a bit about the heat transition and the potential of using geothermal for this heat transition, and tell you a little bit about, or quite a lot about, the experience of Iceland in that heat transition, actually. Just let me first start with where I'm coming from. I'm the man director of GEORG, and GEORG is a geothermal research cluster in Iceland. We basically create a platform between the industry, the public authorities, and research, and are kind of a PMO, project management office. We have high aims, of course. We want to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide by significantly increase the utilization of geothermal. We want to make Iceland a case study for that energy, I would say not nearly anymore, energy-independent society and carbon-neutral society. And we want to create platform for entrepreneurships and innovations in that sense. And of course, contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals in that work. So this picture was shown on the news, a week ago or so. Europe was seeing the warmest October ever recorded. So we are evidently going into, some say, catastrophic global heating or global warming. And this is not the first time we see pictures like this or news like this, where we are talking about global warming or record heats of the world, basically. Europe already is more than 2 degrees above average in this particular month. Of course, there is variation between months. But this is really a significant and very important thing to tackle, the greenhouse gas emissions, and to reduce that as much as possible. Of course, we have been talking about that over the last 2 days. But then you could say, of course, you have this heat. Why heat transition? Of course, we need still heat transition, and maybe specifically because of this global warming. And we can see that heat is about 50% of the end-use energy use in Europe. And half of that heat is actually only on 20 degrees, heating a house like this. So there is a vast amount of energy on very low-grade energy, basically, you could say, that is needed to keep us warm and comfortable. And you can see also on the graph on the side there, you can see the difference between electricity, transport, and heat. And heating is quite high in that area. But you also see the very high fluctuation in heat over the year. Therefore, we need to think about heat storage as well. And in all of these things, geothermal can play a role. And if that was not only because of global warming and things like that, reducing fossil fuels usage and heating, we can also think about the energy security and dependence on, for example, Russian gas, as has been discussed here in the different areas. And gas there's way much gas used for heating in Europe. And this is why we need to think about the heat transition. So renewables are, of course, very vital in this area, and I'm absolutely delighted to see how much efforts are being done now in these regions here to provide electricity, renewable electricity from wind, actually from solar as well, as we talked about here, even though wind is probably more important. And that's really fantastic. But what I'm lacking is to hear what about heat? Heat is also very important. And renewables are not only electricity, it is also heat. And we know that from experience in Iceland, of course. We are, as Johan said, we are probably the world champions in renewable energy, at least for a society big enough like ours. We have 99, practically all electricity in Iceland is produced with renewable energy. Hydropower is about 70%, 30% is from geothermal power. 90% of houses are heated with geothermal in Iceland, and the rest, 10%, is heated with electricity, basically. So 100% of heating is also from renewables, and 85% of the primary use of energy in Iceland is renewables. The remaining 15% is the transport sector, and we are starting to transit there as well. And we are number 2, following Norway, in new cars being electric, either 100% electric or plug-in hybrid electric. And this is basically our future. And we want to be fossil-free in 20 years from now. So and we want to be the first. At least that's what the government said, that we set the target of 2030, but we want to be the first. That's the main target. So basically, this is something that has taken quite a long time. And you can see here 2 different pictures. In the early 1900s, 1910, 1920, Reykjavik looked like this. You had the black coal smoke over the city. We were using coal a lot for heating in the bigger towns and cities. And this was basically not acceptable. In a clear winter day, when you had cold weather, you had calm weather, you got this black smoke. But a day with renewable energy, of course, you have a calm weather and a clear skies. And then, of course, you can see the blue sky, and you can see the cloud machines from geothermal in the highlands there, which are the biggest geothermal power plants in Iceland, providing electricity and heat for the houses. So how did all this happen? How did we come to this state? Of course, it was quite a lot of effort. And basically, the main thing was entrepreneurship and good judgment of people at the time. And it started, we could say, of course, it started when the settlers came to Iceland and started using geothermal as for heating and for bathing and comfort. But the first actual plan was when a farmer heated his farm with water from a nearby hot spring. And then the fuel shortage during the First World War also put a push on politicians and governmental people in Iceland at that time. Another very important thing was that we are, of course, a nation with a lot of sea around us, and the farmers had to go to sea in very rough weathers to catch fish, to live by in the winters. And therefore, it was really important that those people were able to swim. And this particular swimming pool was built in 1923. And this is actually very close to where I grew up, so I took my first swim strokes there in this particular pool. And this is a really natural pool. So basically what they did was just that there was a hot spring and just a little creek coming down the hill. So they dammed that creek and used that as to teach people how to swim and make sure that the farmers did not drown if they went into the sea. They could swim ashore. So this was really important. and basically a step to create better living conditions for people. And again, entrepreneurship, something that people just did on their own in their own community. Then the hot springs, we have quite a lot of hot springs in Iceland, but of course they are not enough to sustain 100% renewable energy, and therefore we had to start drilling. And the first drilling started in the capital area in 1928. So this is a picture from that bore rig, which was always building a house around the bore rigs at that time. So this is from 28. And then 10 years later, we basically started a real, oh no, sorry, this basically was the pilot of this geothermal heating in Iceland. It was a public school and the main hospital in Reykjavik. So basically they had drilled one borehole, sent the water to these two locations to basically be a pilot project of geothermal in that area. And then 10 years later, the politicians basically used this or saw that this was an opportunity to make living standards in Iceland better. And this is basically what is necessary to get the political will, the political strength to take decisions. And at this time, this is from a local newspaper at the time. So it says there in the top, in Icelandic of course, vote for geothermal heating today, vote the C party. And this C party was showing that with the status quo, you have the black smoke, you have the dirty houses, but with the geothermal, you have clean air, you have higher living standards, warmer weather, warmer interiors, you don't need to shovel coals and so on. So basically, they take the chance to say, vote for us, and we will give you district heating system. At this time, this was a major operation. Iceland was one of the poorest nations in Europe at that time. And basically, everyone had to build things with their own hand, using turf as isolation for the pipes. So this was really a primitive way, but this was something that we saw was important for us. There was a shortage of fuel at the time. There was also this very strong feeling of that independence. It has always been a very strong feeling of us since we moved from Norway some 1,000 years ago. We always want to be independent, and that, of course, helped us quite a lot with the transition. But this was quite a lot of effort, and here you see the phase, actually from 1952, a little bit later than the pictures before. At that time, we already had district heating system started in the capital area. About 20% of the heating was done with geothermal, and then the 70 or 80% was with some other means. But then the oil crisis hit, and we really started to accelerate this development. And you can see here the development that we took from 1963 to 1982 or 3, we increased from 20 to 80% the geothermal transition. So basically, in a 20 years' time, we were able to take this transition phase. So this is, the heat transition was doable at that time. You can see the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, of course, during that time for heating. And today, more or less, everything is heated with renewables, either geothermal or electricity and a few oil boilers, actually, which are in remote areas or remote islands, basically, around Iceland. Was it worth it? Yes, it was worth it, definitely. You can see here on this graph the savings that we had with using our local energy instead of using imported oil for heating. And you can see that this is the graph shows here the average, or the basically savings as a percentage of the GDP of Iceland. And you can see there the spikes there is the oil crisis. And then you can see, of course, much higher savings in the particular years. And on average, during this time, it's about 2.4% of savings of GDP during this period, which is a huge numbers, and has helped us very much to be getting from being the poorest country in Europe to one of the better positioned countries. So how was this all funded? How did we do this? And basically, this was more or less all, it was kind of a mix of governmental, municipalities, and private funding. But a very vital part of that was the energy fund in Iceland. So the public or the government basically issued geothermal loans to people that wanted to drill for geothermal. And the loan was basically to reduce the upfront risk, because geothermal is has a very high risk in the beginning, and then a high reward in the end if you manage to hit the veins of hot water. And the idea of this loan was that successful project just repaid the loan. It was a economic loan, or a favorable loan given by the state. But if the project was successful, then the project would receive 50% of the loan as a fund or a grant, and the rest was as a loan. So basically, this reduced a lot the cost of or the risk of starting a project. And you can see here the yellow is the part of geothermal, and then the white line here is basically the loans giving in millions of Icelandic kroner. And you can see during the transition how the loans basically helped quite a lot and was used for doing this. And I think that for geothermal, this is very important tool, or could be, or very important lesson that we can take to the transition in Europe as a whole, to think about this in that term. And in this period of these 20 years I mentioned before, 350 loans were issued and around 20 district heating systems was built, doing this heat transition quite effective and quick. So, again, to the potential in Europe of geothermal. Of course, geothermal can play a vital role. It can be a very important puzzle in the total mix. Of course, I have to admit that geothermal is not going to save everything everywhere, but it's going to be a very, very important part of the transition or energy transition that we are facing now, and especially regarding heat. And heat should always be the main source that you are getting with geothermal. You can possibly have electricity somewhere, and you can possibly have mineral extractions and other things, but getting the heat is the main thing. The rest is kind of a byproduct. Geothermal is, of course, gives you this reliable base load, both on power, where that is applicable, but mainly on heat. And it's very important to balance all the other intermediates. And you can also use geothermal as a storage of heat, which is also very important. And then, of course, it's an indigenous source of energy, and that very much increases the energy security. But in the case of geothermal, it's more or less heat that you can use at the location where you drill for it, so you do not transport it very much. So it's really, really stable. And what is also very important, it may be a bit expensive to start, but when you have a successful well, then you have a fixed price or cost on operation into the future. You don't have to worry about fluctuation in market prices of energy. This can be a stabilizer of that kind as well. So very important part. The potential in Europe is quite significant. You can see here two pictures. One is a picture that shows district heating system, or European cities with district heating systems. And there are quite many of those, especially in the eastern central part here, where you have very systematic district heating systems with different types of energy sources. Like most of the time it's boilers, gas or oil boilers. And in this area you also have quite good potential for geothermal, as you can see from the picture here. And it's quite a low-hanging fruit to take out a boiler and put in a geothermal brine into the system. And we have shown examples of this in Slovakia, for example. I was there for 2 weeks ago, where they had taken a well that was actually drilled for oil and gas exploration, but they did not find any gas or oil. They just found hot water, so they closed it. But later on, this was then turned into a well for this geothermal district heating system. They still have the boilers for spares if something goes wrong or if there is a peak load. But in addition to the boiler, they put in this geothermal system, took the hot water from this particular well, and it has been running now for 30 years and providing this town with geothermal district heating. And now in this oil crisis now, in the last year or so, there is one hospital connected to this district heating system of geothermal, and then another hospital close by that is with this conventional gas-fired boilers. And the price of heating in the hospital with gas-fired boilers is about 500% higher than the cost of heating from the geothermal system, because the geothermal system is just stable. The cost is already occurred. They know exactly what that is, so that just continues. So this is really a low-hanging fruit to connect all these red dots here with geothermal, where it is applicable. And with a system like we did in Iceland with the loans, then that would reduce significantly also the risk in the beginning of finding the best sources. So with that, I think I conclude with just saying that tapping into geothermal is very, very, has never been as important as it is today. And I really hope that we will be able to do that, and the awareness of the heat transition will increase. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think it's very interesting, and I mean the geothermal adventure was not built in one day. I mean, no. you went very far back in history. Yeah. So maybe there are questions to this.
Was it all clear or very confusing? Either one.
It was very interesting. It was magnificent. I mean, this is a fantastic story. Yeah. And you went far back.
Yes, exactly.
1920.
From the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you have a close circulation of the water in these thermal wells?
We have, it depends. In many cases where we are using low temperature fields, like the first ones and the wells drilled after that, they are still operational since 1930s. They are more or less not closed wells. So they just go, we pump up the water, we take it to the district heating system, and then we return it to the sea. But for the high temperature ones where we have, where we're using the geothermal heat also to produce electricity, there we have closed loop systems, meaning that the brine from the high temperature also goes down to, again, are injected at the same location, and a groundwater is heated up with the heat from the high temperature. And that groundwater is basically drinking water is sent to the system.
And there was one question here, this gentleman.
Question, how much Iceland started to invest in other countries in Europe to find this geothermal heat 2,000 meters? And are you ready to come to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania also? And when?
Let's say that yes, we have companies that are investing abroad quite a lot in geothermal. not so much investment going on in Europe still. It's more in Africa and in China and in other places like that. But there is interest, and I know that there. In this trip I went to Slovakia, there were a number of Icelandic companies that were coming with us, interested in looking into the opportunities there. And we have, at GEORG, we had some communication with Lithuania, Klaipėda, a few years back, with the interest of exploring the geothermal potentials there. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that there is interest, and we are always open for any opportunities in that sense. But of course, we are, this is the part of the tricky thing with geothermal. First we need to understand the geology, and that's expensive. Basically, you need to collect all the information about the geology, about the settings there, and the potential. And when that is clear, then it's easier to start investing. So it's a bit different to wind and solar, where you just take, you pretty much can do the research much more quicker.
Okay. No more questions, then I think we should applaud.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And then I will just close the conference by very few words. This conference was a very important part of the priorities of the Norwegian priorities under the chairmanship, Nordic Council Ministers. When we started to plan this, we had the energy crisis as a background for the conference. And the European agenda has been a very strong component, I think, of our discussions. Yesterday, we had very good presentations by the IEA, by IRENA, by DG Energy, and by Jacques Delors Institute with Vinoa. I think one point to pick up, we cannot afford to have a backlash on the green transition and competitiveness when the energy crisis is dominating. We got very good insight into the situation in the electricity market and possible short-term and long-term solutions and the dilemmas in that respect. In the Nordic and Baltic countries, it is impressive. It is the impression that the market has served us very well. On energy efficiency, we had good examples and best practices, policies from some countries. Today, we have seen excellent examples and planning in the offshore wind, which we have seen now. And it's very important to bring in the TSOs. We had a punchline by Iceland on geothermal. And then to the thanks for the conference. Thank you very much to the Office of Nordic Council Ministers here in Tallinn, Christer Haglund and Madis Tilga, who has been working very efficiently. Thanks to the audience for active participation, many questions to the speakers, and not at least, thank you to the speakers. So we will come back, I think, next year to develop this concept even further, and we would also be glad to receive ideas for subjects and themes and to discuss. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good, safe trip back.